What would you do if the person who grew up with you, the person who shared your last name, stood up in front of hundreds of people and called you the family failure, not behind your back, not as a joke between siblings, but publicly, at his own wedding? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. That's exactly what happened to Emily Carter, a 29-year-old woman sitting quietly at a decorated reception table while her older brother celebrated what he believed was the happiest day of his life. The ballroom at the Grand Harbor Hotel was filled with almost 200 guests. Crystal chandeliers, white roses, expensive champagne. Everything about the evening screamed success. And at the center of it all stood Daniel Carter, 34 years old, the golden child of the Carter family, the one everyone admired, the one who always seemed to win. Emily had spent most of her life standing in his shadow, so when Daniel raised his glass for a toast, no one expected anything unusual. But then he looked directly at Emily. He laughed, and he said the words that froze the entire table. "This is my sister, the family failure." The guests laughed, some awkwardly, some loudly. Emily didn't defend herself. She didn't argue. She simply sat there in silence, because there was something no one in that room knew about her. And seconds later, the back doors of the ballroom slowly opened. A man in a gray suit stepped inside, holding a thick folder. How does someone become the family disappointment? Sometimes it starts with one decision. One moment where everything changes, and no one understands why. 7 years before that wedding, Emily Carter was 22 years old and halfway through law school. On paper, she was doing well. Good grades, a respected internship at a mid-sized financial law firm in Chicago. Her parents believed she was on the same successful path as her brother Daniel. But then something strange happened. Emily suddenly left law school. No long explanation, no emotional family announcement. Just a quiet decision that shocked everyone around her. Her parents were furious. Daniel was worse. At family dinners, he'd lean back in his chair and smirk. "So, Emily," he'd say loudly, "how's that exciting career and whatever you're doing now?" The room would get awkwardly quiet. Emily would usually just shrug and smile, because the truth was complicated and dangerous. During her internship, Emily had discovered irregular financial transfers buried deep inside corporate records, millions of dollars quietly moving between shell companies. At first, she thought it was a mistake. Then she realized it wasn't. Those records eventually reached federal investigators, and before Emily even finished the internship, she was approached privately by a government task force that had been tracking a massive financial fraud network. They needed someone who understood the records, someone who had already seen the suspicious activity, someone who could work quietly. Emily said yes, but the deal came with one condition. She couldn't tell anyone, not her friends, not her parents, and definitely not Daniel. For the next 7 years, Emily lived what looked like a scattered life to outsiders. Temporary consulting jobs, long gaps in employment, quiet travel that she never explained. Meanwhile, Daniel's career exploded. By age 31, he had joined a fast-growing financial firm called Redbridge Capital, the kind of company that bragged about aggressive growth and innovative investment strategies. Daniel loved the prestige, loved the attention, loved reminding people that he was the successful Carter sibling. By the time his wedding day arrived, Daniel had turned teasing into something sharper. "The Carter family embarrassment," he once joked at Thanksgiving while guests laughed uncomfortably. Emily never fought back. She just let people believe what they wanted. But what Daniel didn't realize was that Emily had spent 7 years analyzing financial records connected to companies just like his. And on the night of his wedding, Daniel said something during his speech that made Emily's stomach drop. Because in one careless sentence, he revealed a phrase she had only ever seen inside confidential investigation files. And the moment she heard it, Emily realized something terrifying. Her brother might not just be arrogant, he might be connected to the investigation. Have you ever heard someone say something that instantly changes the way you see them? That's what happened next. Daniel stood confidently at the microphone, champagne glass raised, enjoying the attention of the entire reception hall. Nearly 200 guests were watching him. Friends, co-workers, relatives. His new wife, Lauren Mitchell, stood beside him, smiling proudly. Daniel loved moments like this. He cleared his throat and continued his speech. "Let's be honest," he said with a grin, glancing toward Emily's table. "Every family has that one person who just never really makes it." A few guests laughed. Daniel pointed casually toward Emily. "And in our family, that would be my sister." More laughter. Some people shifted uncomfortably, but no one interrupted. Emily kept her face calm, though her fingers tightened slightly around the stem of her glass. Daniel wasn't finished. "While some of us worked hard and built real careers," he continued, "others disappeared for years and still somehow act like they matter." That line made Emily slowly lift her eyes. There was something strange about the way he said it. Almost knowing. Then Daniel laughed again and added one more sentence. "But hey," he said, raising his glass proudly, "at least one Carter knows how to make money the right way." The right way. The words echoed in Emily's mind, because that exact phrase had appeared dozens of times in the confidential emails she had spent years studying during the investigation. Internal Redbridge Capital Communications often used that phrase as coded language when discussing questionable financial transfers. Emily's heartbeat quickened. Was it just coincidence? Or had Daniel unknowingly repeated something he'd heard inside the company? Then something even stranger happened. Daniel smirked and added almost jokingly, "Trust me, if you knew what we actually move around in finance, you'd all stop worrying about 9-to-5 jobs." The room laughed again, but Emily didn't. Because those words sounded dangerously close to something investigators had been trying to prove for years. That Redbridge Capital wasn't just bending financial rules. They might be laundering enormous sums of money. Emily felt a cold realization forming. If Daniel was involved, even unknowingly, the situation was about to get very serious. And as if on cue, the large wooden doors at the back of the ballroom suddenly opened. A man in a gray suit stepped inside. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't dressed like a guest. And in his hand was a thick legal folder. What Emily noticed next made her breath catch. Her own name was printed on the front of the file, and written just beneath it was Daniel Carter's name. Why would a lawyer walk into the middle of a wedding reception? The music had just faded after Daniel's speech. 8 guests were still holding champagne glasses, some laughing, others whispering awkwardly after the uncomfortable joke about Emily. Then the doors opened. The man in the gray suit walked slowly across the polished ballroom floor. Calm, focused, professional. This wasn't a guest who had arrived late. This was someone who had come with a purpose. Emily recognized the type immediately. She had seen lawyers like him many times during the investigation meetings over the past 7 years. He stopped beside her table. "Ms. Emily Carter?" he asked. His voice was calm but firm. Emily nodded. The room started to quiet down as nearby guests noticed what was happening. Even Daniel paused at the stage, watching with curiosity. The lawyer placed a thick folder in front of Emily. Then he said something that made several people turn their heads. "You'll want to review this immediately." Daniel laughed from the stage. "Oh, come on," he said jokingly. "Emily, what is that? A job application?" A few people chuckled nervously, but the lawyer didn't laugh. Instead, he turned slowly toward Daniel, and in a voice loud enough for the nearby tables to hear, he said one sentence that instantly changed the atmosphere in the room. "You're going to want to read this as well, Mr. Carter." The laughter faded. Emily opened the folder. The first page was a formal legal notice. At the top were 3 words she recognized instantly: Federal Financial Investigation. Her eyes moved down the page. Then she saw the line that made her stomach drop. Subject: Daniel Carter, Redbridge Capital Asset Review. Emily slowly lifted her head. Daniel's confident smile had begun to fade. Lauren looked confused. Guests were now openly whispering. The lawyer spoke again. This notice confirms that financial accounts connected to Redbridge Capital are currently under review for transactions totaling approximately $42 million. The number spread through the room like electricity. 42 million. Daniel stepped down from the stage, his face pale. That can't be right, he said quickly. I don't control any of that. The lawyer watched him carefully. But your authorization appears on several transfers. Daniel's breathing became uneven. I was just following instructions, he blurted. And the moment those words left his mouth, Emily felt a chilling realization settle in. Because Daniel had just admitted something investigators had been trying to prove for years. And now he had said it out loud, in front of witnesses, at his own wedding. But the most shocking moment of the entire night hadn't happened yet, because everyone in that ballroom was about to discover who Emily Carter really was. The entire ballroom had gone silent. Just minutes earlier, people were laughing, clinking glasses, celebrating a wedding. Now, nearly 200 guests were staring at the same table, waiting to understand what was happening. Daniel stood frozen a few feet away, his confident smile completely gone. Lauren looked back and forth between her husband and the lawyer, confusion spreading across her face. Emily slowly closed the folder. For years, she had imagined what it might feel like if the truth ever surfaced. She just never imagined it would happen like this. Not at a wedding, not after being called the family failure in front of everyone. Daniel ran a hand through his hair and looked directly at her. Emily, he said quietly, trying to laugh it off. Tell them this is some kind of mistake. But Emily didn't laugh. Instead, she stood up. Every chair around the table creaked as people leaned closer to hear. And then Emily said something that made the room hold its breath. I didn't disappear for 7 years because I failed. She looked directly at Daniel. I disappeared because I was helping investigate companies like yours. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The lawyer nodded slightly beside her. Emily continued, her voice steady. For the past 7 years, I've been working with a federal financial investigation team analyzing suspicious transfers connected to Redbridge Capital. Daniel's face went completely blank. The same sister he had mocked moments earlier had been quietly building the case around the company he worked for. And now, the speech meant to embarrass her had done something else entirely. It had pushed the investigation into the open. Within minutes, several additional officials arrived at the hotel. The wedding reception ended early, and the man who had proudly called his sister the family failure became the center of a federal investigation before the night was over. Funny how quickly a room stops laughing when the truth finally walks in. So here's a question for you. How many people get judged as failures while secretly building something no one else understands yet? And if you were sitting in Emily's chair that night, would you have stayed silent or revealed the truth right there in front of everyone?